in conversation with Alex Martin. Alex Martin is finally fulfilling a lifelong dream of becoming an author. She started writing in earnest at the age of 7, but it took a very long time before she had the courage to publish a literary effort. Now she's in the final throes of writing her 10th novel, and the experience has lived up to every cherished wish. In between this creative episode, she has variously earned a living as a personal assistant, a grape picker, a campaign courier, a mother, an aromatherapist, herbalist, and Reiki healer. She loves to garden, walk her dog, and cook for a crowd, but also needs to stretch, rest, and gaze at sunset, preferably over the sea. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to open the show today, Alex Martin. How are you
Hello,
doing,
Peter.
Alex?
I'm great. Thank you, Peter. It's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, I'm excited too to have you on the show today. You have such an amazing bio.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Alice, I want to first commend your outstanding bodies of works. You've written 9 novels and you are in the process of writing the 10th one. I'm a
That's
bit
right.
confused of where to start from, obviously. Hopefully, we begin with the famous Daffodils, which is the first
Yes,
book in the Catherine Wills saga series. I would
that's
like to
right.
ask you, how does this book come about? What inspired you to write Daffodils? Beautiful cover, really.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a lovely design lady who helps me with the covers, but the ideas are mine. So it's a story that's set in World War I
Mhm.
in England, and it does go into France as well. But
Wow.
the daffodils are there because it's all about hope, even in the darkest of times. And
Oh.
it's a play on the traditional poppy, which is usually used as a symbol of the First World War.
Hmm.
But I wanted to use daffodils because it's about hope, even when things are terrible. And the picture there is a genuine picture of 4 women who worked behind the scenes in France, where the
Wow.
story is based. So it's a genuine photograph of women who did what happens in this story.
Hmm.
And they became mechanics who serviced the ambulances
Hmm.
in France, where the British Expeditionary Force was based. But I wrote this book because I lived in the village where the story is set, which is in
Wow.
Wiltshire, which is a very ancient county in England, and it's
Wow.
where my children were born. And I was talking to our neighbours. We lived in a little row of houses, cottages, and he was 100 years old. And he told me
Hmm.
about how they had the plumbing arrived to the cottages. So, first of all, they just had a pump on the village green and they had to carry the water. Then they had a little tap at the end of the row of cottages, then one between each couple of cottages, until
Hmm.
eventually they had a little kitchen on the back of the cottage. And I
Wow.
thought that's really interesting. And it was attached to a big estate house, which had the gardens at the back of the cottages. So I loved being there and I loved the history of where it was. So I thought, well, I'll set the story here. I knew I wanted to write something, but that was my framework. And
Hmm.
I thought, I'll just write about how the village developed in that
Yeah.
time of my neighbor. But actually, what I hadn't reckoned on was that I, like all the villagers of that time, was dragged into the First World War because
Wow.
it was also at that time. So I ended up doing a massive amount of research and actually ending up taking the story to the battlefields of France and
Hmm.
having to research how trench warfare worked, how the British Army worked, how cruel they were to their soldiers. And
Hmm.
I found that the research was very shocking at what I discovered. So the story became very much bigger and deeper than I ever intended it to be, which was
Wow.
a simple romance story. But actually, it became a um, really big story based around the war. And also, what I discovered, which I found amazing, was how women's roles changed. It was the beginning of the modern woman as we know it now, because they took on the roles of men
Hmm.
and did all sorts of very brave things, running the country, working in factories, running the farms, in ways that they were never allowed to do, particularly at that era. And the heroine of my story, she starts off as a sort of ambitious, rather shallow girl
Mm,
who has aspirations, but because of the way society was very, very tight and very tightly controlled by rich people, she could never break out and, explore who she was. But the war helped her to do that. So the story is all about her emancipation and how by some tragedies that happened in her life,
mm.
she ends up working on the front in France and discovering that she's very good as a car mechanic. And that
Wow,
sets up the other 5 books that follow, which
wow.
follow her life.
Wow, this is quite amazing, really. And I love the start. I love knowing about the start of Daffodils. And I need to commend, while I searched through it on Amazon, I saw quite a lot of amazing feedbacks about it. And, that alone is quite commendable because I
Thank
read just some
you.
reviews of some people mentioning about the war and some other things encapsulated in it. And I was like, wow, this actually makes for an interesting discussion. Sounds like something I'd love to pick up afterwards. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Well, a lot
Yeah,
is written about the Second World War, but not so much about the First World War from
yeah.
a woman's perspective. And it wasn't until I did the research myself that I understood,
Wow.
a massive social change happened. And the next book, which I think is your next question, which is
Yeah, yeah,
Peace Lily, is all
yeah,
about how after the war, starts in 1919, and some people have lost their lives by this point who were in the story. But when they come back to Wiltshire, which is a very old, set in its ways kind of place in England,
yeah,
everybody, all the hierarchy, the people on the big estate who employ the
yeah.
villagers, they want everybody to go back in their boxes. And my heroine, who's called Katie, doesn't want to do that. So it's all about her trying to not go back to being a servant and finding a way to break free and become a woman in her own right.
Hmm.
And she goes to America and she gets into trouble there, and all sorts of things happen that threaten her whole family. But in the end, she finds a way to do
Wow.
something quite extraordinary.
Wow. That's amazing, really. That's amazing. And I know you already showed the piece Lily to the camera, but then I'll have to go with my question for it now. For readers who
Yeah.
haven't read Peace Lily yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what I'd expect picking up Peace Lily? Also,
Okay.
where is the
Yes.
K Train Wheel series set? And why did you
It's
cover both World Wars?
Well, like I say, I kind of got drawn into it because of the period in history where I started,
Hmm.
which was triggered by my neighbour's story about the
Yeah,
plumbing, something very mundane.
yeah.
But the what was fascinating about it was, although these were very ordinary people, they were sucked into the war and everything was upset. It was a complete catastrophe
Hmm.
for the not only the soldiers, but
Yeah.
the whole way of life was never the same again. And
Hmm.
that's what I found fascinating. And this piece Lily is all about how it was after the war, when people had been killed, but it was also about how they picked up the threads of life again, and actually tried to bring the freedom and the courage that they'd found within themselves back into life and
Hmm.
change the social order. So
Hmm.
that's what it's about. So Katie actually, she goes back to being a servant, but only because she can go to America, which is really
Wow.
exciting because she always wanted to travel. But in fact, she causes another scandal with a guy there who attacks her. But she gets the blame for it because of the
Hmm.
way the lady in the manor house treats her.
Check it out.
So she almost loses everything a second time. But then she's
Oh,
very resourceful. So she finds a way through her skills as a car mechanic to set up a garage, which
wow.
is a very radical thing for a woman at that time. So that's what she
Wow.
goes on to do in Speedwell. and she actually gets into motor racing.
Wow.
And she makes friends with the daughter of the manor house, whose
Hmm.
husband then funds her garage. And they get into motor racing, and it's all about the struggles they have to do that, and all about the kind of the criticism from men around her
Yeah.
because she's a woman in a man's world, and how she deals with that whilst starting a family and stuff like that.
Could you turn it this? I want to see how voluminous it is. I want to
The
see
better.
how voluminous it is. I just wanted to
Oh,
turn it
sorry.
this way. Wow. Wow. Anyway, I'm going to my next question. It's amazing. I don't know how people come up with these huge novels, really. It's amazing.
Well, I had so much fun doing it. I really did.
Honestly, it's lovely, really. I need to commend you, really. It's an amazing work. It's an amazing. We
Thank
all
you.
know we all know that writing isn't an easy task, but then to be able to
It's
do
not
it shows
easy.
that you're
Yeah.
dedicated and you have a passion in it. So it's really amazing. And I think writers need to get more praises for their works. And we need to get more praise and
It's
recognition
true.
for our works because writing is actually not an easy task. For someone to
No,
sit down and pull up an interesting, book together, it deserves a praise. It deserves a recognition.
agree with you more.
Yeah,
It's very hard work, and it's
it's
hard
a
to keep
lot.
going sometimes.
Absolutely. Oh,
Sorry. There are three more books with the Catherine Wheel series.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Which takes the whole story through to the very end,
Oh,
and is takes the Second World War into account as well, with the children of the people in Daffodils. So I
wow.
just want to make sure people know that it doesn't stop
Yeah,
at the third book.
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Now let's go to the twisted vine. The twisted
The
vine.
Twisted Vine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Twisted Vine is my first book,
Oh,
and it's autobiographical. Um, I
oh,
I traveled to France on my own in my 20s, a long time ago.
oh.
And so it's based on all the diaries I kept then, because we writers, we just have to write whatever we're doing, right?
Hmm.
So I kept a diary. So it's based on when I went grape picking, and I lived in my car, and I had a lot of adventures, and did things that I would never dream of doing now.
Wow.
um, and I worked on campsites and stuff like that. So that's the background to it. And there's a chateau there in France, and obviously a grapevine there. So that's the background to the story, but it's actually a bit of a mystery thriller,
Hmm.
about a dynasty set in the chateau, and about a young girl who's she is picking grapes there, but she actually discovers a murder, and uncovers the murderer while
Wow.
she's there. Yeah.
Wow. That sounds quite amazing to me, really. I love the sound of it. And now, Alex, there's this question that I love asking authors, novelists that come on my show. I've always been fascinated about how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that it eventually makes a great novel. This always leave me thinking about how exactly they got their ideas and inspiration. Now, as far as writing is concerned, I would love to ask you too, how do you get your inspirations and ideas? Where do they come from?
Well, they often come to me in dreams,
Wow,
very, very clearly.
wow,
Sometimes when I'm asleep, they come to me, as a sort of perfect scene that is the trigger, but it can be in a daydream where I'm just, sitting, not thinking about things, and it would just come to me. And sometimes it will come in one go. The whole idea will just come in one go. But sometimes it's more kind of craft work where you might overhear a conversation, in a
mm,
cafe or a train station, or it
mm,
might be a landscape, it might be all sorts of things, or something that happens in your life,
mm,
and or an old memory that resurfaces. And I think, wherever you go, there are always ideas for stories. There just
mm,
isn't enough time and energy to write them all up, because that's a lot of work. So I always have loads of ideas,
mm,
but I find I have to be careful on which ideas I select, because not all of them are going to have enough in them to make a full book.
Mm.
So I've written some short stories which are available on my website as well as a free giveaway. But I think I have to have enough excitement and enthusiasm and also a theme that I'm going to pursue and discover myself,
Mm.
so that there's something more than just those dreams, just the moment of inspiration. That's the easy bit. It's finding enough depth to want to have the energy, the enthusiasm, and the discipline to carry that through. So I've got lots of stories I've started and not finished
Wow.
because I've had an idea, and then I sort of think, no, this isn't going to be enough. It's not
Mm.
enough. I don't feel excited enough to follow through and do the
Yeah.
work. So, but
Wow.
I always find having inspiration never a problem.
Wow. It's amazing, actually, how authors and writers, I've had a lot of interviews, and most times people tell
I'm
me
sure.
I get my ideas from dreams. From dreams, I'm like, wow, that's quite amazing, really. Since everyone is getting their ideas from dreams, because I too get my own ideas from dreams,
Do
and I
you?
thought I'm the only one. I never knew, quite a lot of people also get ideas from dreams. That's
Yeah.
amazing to know, really.
Well, I think what happens is that we're thinking in our subconscious all the time, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because they say we only use 1/10 of our brain. So
Wow.
it's probably you're thinking about it in the back of your head all the time, when you see things or you have experiences, and it's kind of percolating in the back of your head. And then I think sometimes when you're dreaming or you're asleep, you know, this part of our brain quietens down a bit and it allows that subconscious to come through. But
Hmm.
often we forget it, don't we, when we wake up? That's the thing, is to catch it before it goes.
Interesting. Interesting. I love the sound of that. And there's this question that come to my mind. I'm not sure if you would like to answer it. Could you tell us about your career as an herbalist? And does it has anything to do with your writing? Is there any connection between your career being an herbalist and your writing? Is there any sort of connection between the two?
Oh, definitely. Because I ran a clinic for 25 years
Oh.
and I saw people with lots of conditions and problems. So I saw a lot of humanity and the things that they were struggling with.
Hmm.
And it gives you a great sort of bank of experience to draw upon for characters. And there isn't anybody I have taken from those experiences, but you take little bits of people and put them together into a fictitious person. But you going into some depth with people when they are not well or they're struggling with things, it does give you a lot of insight into human problems, really. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a very rich experience,
Wow.
and I very much enjoyed it.
Wow. That's good. Amazing. Thank you so much for answering.
It's okay.
Thank you.
And also I think we come on to the other books I've done, which is kind of to do with more spiritual realms, where when I was giving healing, and it just happened spontaneously. I didn't set out to do it.
Wow.
Um, Hands-on people, I had sometimes saw things for them, images for them, which meant something to them.
Wow.
And like a simple one I can remember is that I was with somebody. She was trying to decide whether to take a senior job in the health service, and I saw an eagle flying over a mountain whilst I
Hmm.
was working with her. And I told her that, and she said, I think that means I should take the job. I need to fly higher. So
Oh.
it was, and there were some much more kind of personal anecdotes that I won't share, but
Hmm.
it made me think a lot about how energy works, how we're on this planet, earthbound, but there are lots of other things happening around us that maybe are not so far away as we think, that there are other influences on us. So
Spiritual.
that's what I try to explore with my ghost stories,
Hmm.
about because when I've lost people, I've still had contact with them after
Wow.
they've passed over,
Wow.
and it hasn't been scary at all. It's been very helpful. So I just wanted to play with that a bit about spirits, if you like, who've passed over, who can still send love and helpfulness to us, even
Hmm.
though we're alive. That really interests me.
Wow. And I think that goes alongside with my question about your fascination with spirit who have passed
Yeah,
over at the
yeah,
interface between this world and the next.
yeah,
Wow.
definitely. So in these two ghosts, this isn't a cover I've used. I haven't got a cover of the current book, but this is two stories that I call the spirit level stories,
Mm.
and they are about ghosts who've passed over, but they can interact with people who are sensitive.
Wow.
So there are two women in this called Percy and Faye who they're clairvoyant, in fact.
Mm.
So the Rose Trellis is set in at the time of the Civil War in England, and it's about a love triangle, and it's about the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. I don't know if you're familiar with that bit of English history.
No.
And a woman they both loved, and not she's
Wow.
not at peace. So they, in fact, sort of contact her and bring her peace so that she can then pass on.
Mm.
And then this one is about a rock star who's got a studio in a North Wales island,
Wow.
and he's haunted by some druids who are worried about climate change and preserving the earth. So they can interface with them and actually pass the message on them. And they go to the COP26 climate
Wow.
summit with the message from the druidess from 1,000 years ago.
Wow.
So
Wow.
most of those tours, I just played around with that kind of experience, of interacting with people who've passed over,
Wow.
but not
Wow.
making it kind of too dark. It's not. I'm trying to show that it's a continuum.
That's interesting.
That's what I think. That's what I've
Yeah.
experienced anyway.
I love the fact that you included STEAM in there. It sounds amazing to me, really. And I'm curious to know if you experienced any challenges while writing your books. If there is any, could you share with us what challenge it is and how you ultimately overcame it? Also, I'd love to ask you, how do you handle criticism as a writer, especially the negative ones? I think I got two questions there already.
Yeah. I think, well, challenges, I think my greatest challenge is when I'm writing a story and it goes really well, and then I sort of I lose a bit of momentum. In
Oh,
sometimes it's what I call the soggy middle. You
wow.
know where you know what's starting, you know what you want to do, and you know how it's going to end, but sometimes it kind of dips a bit in the middle,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
you just got to really keep going. And
Yeah.
sometimes I play a game with myself in that I sit in front of the computer and I think, okay, you're not allowed to have a drink, you're not allowed to go and make tea or anything until you have at least one sentence. And I make myself sit there,
Wow.
until I got something down. And usually, once I've got one sentence down,
Yeah.
it starts to flow. So
Hmm. Wow.
sometimes it takes quite a lot of grit. I'm sure it's the same with you, just to keep going and finish the project.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
sometimes I need to bounce off other people at that point. Just I've got to this point, but I can't quite see how to do the very next bit. And I talk to other people and they give me their inspiration or ideas, and it just sparks you off again, gives you that oomph of energy.
Hmm. Wow. This is
I
quite
do that a lot with
amazing.
my son. My son is helps edit my books as well, so he
Oh,
loves to
interesting.
do brainstorming with me. So that's a great joy.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing thing. And I love your answers to these questions, really. It sounds quite amazing and quite interesting to me. So thank you
Good.
so much for sharing. I love the sound of it. And it really
Well,
made for
I
an
said,
interesting discussion. I can go on and on with this, really.
well, as it comes to negative criticism, luckily I haven't had very much, but I think if somebody writes a review that's quite sort of animated, even though
Yeah,
it's negative, I just think, well, in some ways I've done my job because they're
yeah,
so engaged with it. They
yeah.
care so much. But some people are just mean, aren't they? But I think you've got to read it, you've got to be open to it, and you've got to learn from it and just think, is there something I need to learn here, or is this somebody just letting off some steam? And you have to, as you get more experienced, I think you learn to discern, you know, whether it's somebody who's a bit jealous, or, you know,
Yeah.
somebody who's just trying to ruin your chances because it happens,
Yeah.
or whether it's somebody who just didn't understand what you were doing. But, you know, I've had thousands and thousands of reviews now, thankfully, and about half a dozen really bad ones. So
Yeah.
I just think, you know, on balance, I'm getting it right. But I will read them, and I will try and discover if there's something I need to do, and then chuck away the things that don't resonate. Otherwise, it could just crush you if you let it.
That's true. Well, I agree with you. And this actually got me remember a response someone gave yesterday, an author gave yesterday. It was like, I've written the book, I've done my part. It is left for the readers to interpret it in
Exactly.
their own perspective. Sometimes
Exactly.
they might get the message correctly. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message that
Yeah.
the writer seek to communicate. And sometimes they might just miss the entire message and you have
Yeah.
nothing to do about it, you know.
Yeah. I
So
know.
it's the
I had one
business of the
yesterday
readers.
for I had one yesterday from Speedwell saying the book had left her in tears because it has got a very sad ending.
Mm.
Um, and she just said, "I'm so upset. I'm so upset, you know, that this happened at the end." And oh my goodness, and I loved it so much. And I just
Wow.
thought, well, okay, she's
It's
got
a
very
mixed
mixed
feeling.
feelings, but she has feelings, you know, and that's cool. I've got, you know, she's really engaged, and she's got out of her own
Yeah.
life, really got involved. So I take that as a win.
Wow, that's amazing, really. Yeah. And it's really amazing the fact that, and it's actually very interesting to hear people's feedbacks, even if they get the message correctly, even if they are close to getting the message correctly, and even if they mix it, they have, we human beings have a different way of interpreting what we read. The same book that you read and I read, we can have different ways of interpreting it. I
Definitely.
can interpret
Yeah.
it in a more personal, especially when I see something that you touch on that I might maybe say, for instance, I've experienced in time past, or someone close to me I've experienced in time past, and it gets me reminiscent about that experience. It might
Mm,
put me in a different shoes and give me a
mm,
better, different understanding than you and
exactly.
from
Yeah.
someone else, so
Of
it's a
course.
diverse way of reacting to feedbacks and
Yes.
of our work. So it's an amazing thing, really.
And I think, you know, the things that I wrote 10 years ago, I
Yeah,
wouldn't write them like that now,
absolutely.
you
That's
know.
true.
So you grow as a reader as well as a writer, I think. So
Absolutely.
it depends where they are in their lives, what's going on for them,
Absolutely.
and you know, which makes it lovely because I just love the feeling that
Yeah,
people are even reading them, that, you know, that work is not wasted. And
absolutely.
I think it's a great privilege that they're sharing it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Alex. Well, I'm enjoying this conversation. I don't want it to end. It's quite amazing, really. It's quite lovely. I love your take. I love your take on these answers. It's quite,
Good,
educative and very informative for me. So
good.
thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
That's
And
okay.
now,
My
yeah, and
pleasure.
apart from the books we've covered thus far, do you have any other works you've authored or maybe currently working on?
Yeah, I'm just about wrapping up my 10th book, which
Oh,
is quite different. It's a contemporary book, and it's
wow.
about three women in a village in Devon, in England, who are trapped in difficult relationships.
Mm,
So, and about how it's always going to be feminist with me. So, it's about how they resolve those difficulties.
mm.
And there is a bit of a ghostly element in who are
Oh,
helping them. But it's much less part of it. It's just a kind of background thing.
mm,
And there's a bit of a mystery thriller element to it as well. But it
wow.
starts off with there's one woman who is violently abused. She's physically
Mm,
abused. And there's another woman who's anorexic, And
Wow.
then the third woman has too many children, and
Wow.
her husband doesn't want to do anything about it. So they've each got these contemporary problems, and in the end, they all kind of come together to help each other.
Wow.
Really enjoyed writing it. It's been much easier because, I mean, I love research, but at the same time, it's quite nice not to have to study a war, you know, because the research for those ones took years.
Yeah.
It's so much easier, really.
It's actually an amazing thing, really. I love the sound of your books and that you have a 10th novel, working on an amazing thing. It's an
It
amazing
is. And I
journey.
feel very lucky that I think if you do anything creative, whatever it is, it's a way of being happy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because it just gives you a purpose in life and outlet. You know, the world is quite troubled at the moment. To escape into that creativity,
Absolutely.
it's a real joy. It's hard,
Yeah.
but it's also rather wonderful, I think.
Amazing.
I
I
feel
think this is very lovely. I really love your take on this. And now, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your books or writing that we did not mention or cover in this interview, and you'd love the viewers to know?
now you've got me. I can't think of an answer for that one. I'm sure I wrote something down. Like to say, I think my main strength as a writer are my characters, and
Hmm.
I had a bit of a breakthrough. I think on my second book,
Yeah.
when I realised that I was sitting back and writing,
Hmm.
you know, like you were God, and you were just sort of making your characters do stuff like they were on a chessboard. And I
Hmm.
had suddenly had a breakthrough that what I had to do was to stop doing that and actually be my characters.
Hmm.
And this is something I like to share with other writers, because for me, I had to live as if I was the character.
Wow.
And then the story just, I got into being them, and then I would know exactly what was going to happen,
Hmm.
because it was like I was watching a video. So it's like, instead of sort of orchestrating what happens, I mean, you have to have that in your head as well. But I actually sort of put myself in their position and thought, oh, how would they be feeling? If I was that character, even if it was a bad character, what
Hmm.
would they do as
Wow.
that character? Because I got some nasty ones as well as the nice ones, you know, and you sort of think, well, what would they do? Especially if it's somebody who's got a point of view. So
Hmm.
I tend to write with multiple point of views. I think in one book I've got six people narrating.
Wow. Interesting.
So I'd like to just be that person and just think, well, it's no good me thinking what would Alex Martin do. I have to think what would that person do
Hmm.
in this situation and actually trying to live it, which makes it very tiring as a first draft because I'm literally living it in some scary situations as well.
Hmm.
Um, but that for me was a really big breakthrough.
This is very amazing, really. I'm taking some notes as you are speaking.
Good. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, cool.
You saw that. Interesting, really. It's one of the importance and the beauty of conducting interviews because I'm learning actually. Conversation we get to have. I am learning every day from what you're
Of
saying.
course.
I'm taking
Yeah.
notes. I'm trying to utilize it in my own. So it's an
Yeah,
amazing
good.
experience.
Good.
It's always
Yeah,
lovely.
good.
Yeah.
Well, I did that when I started writing. I was still working in my clinic, but I did a course for 3 years
Wow.
with the Arts Council, and it was intense, but it was online, and it was basically peer review, so it was
Oh.
completely anonymous, but it was like
Oh.
had a top 10 chart, so there were hundreds and hundreds of people on there, and all your stories got put into it anonymously, and everybody had to review everybody else's work and then
Hmm.
post their review. But it was a very clever the way they did it. It was called You Write On, is the website, and it's run by the Arts Council. And I did that
Wow.
for 3 years, and it was people I met on there, even though it's anonymous. There were ways of getting to know each other,
Oh,
um,
interesting.
who encouraged me to publish. And it was through
Wow.
those lovely friends and they said, just go for it. And I got into
Hmm.
the top 5 of the chart. So I
Hmm.
then had the confidence to feel that I could do it, you
Hmm.
know. which I
Oh,
didn't have before. So I really recommend something like that, like a creative writing course, or
yeah.
anywhere where other people are looking at your work, and there's no incentive for them to give you praise, but it's just honest.
Mm,
And I mean, some of it was really hard, you know, to swallow, but and also you looked at everybody else's works. I read stories that I wouldn't normally read.
mm,
That's not my comfort zone at all.
wow.
And I learned a lot through doing that and reviewing their work, and
Wow.
realized what I didn't want to write about some of the time. And
Interesting.
it was very interesting. It was very
Interesting.
interesting, and
Yeah.
it did sort of raise my game, I think.
Wow.
And it gets used to the harsh world of being out there published, and the reviews you get. It prepared you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's good
amazing.
wisdom. Mm.
That's amazing, Alex. I love the sound of it. And now let's have your advice as a published author. What sort of advice would you have for other writers who are still
Mm.
struggling with publishing a book? Let's get to hear from your expertise as an author of 9 books and impending one. That's an author of 10 books in total. What sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still
uh,
struggling with publishing a book?
well, if you're publishing, if you're struggling with the writing, then just keep going,
Yeah.
and do get other people to read your work and
Mm,
feedback to you. You know, don't lock yourself away, but actually share your work, and find out, if it's people enjoy it, or if they don't enjoy it, and just listen to that.
mm,
I think as a publisher, I self-published, and I did do well. But now I would say I find the marketing much harder, because it's
wow.
much more sophisticated,
Mm,
and complicated. Um, so I'm thinking of pitching my next book to a publisher instead of doing it myself, so that there are
interesting.
young people who are really clever with technology and know all the platforms and everything,
Mm,
to market it.
wow.
Because I'm
That's
finding that
amazing.
harder now, because when I started out, which was 2011, it was much more straightforward. Like Facebook was open to everybody. You could post and it would reach lots of people. Now it's all very much closed down.
Restricted, yeah.
Twitter's been sold, it's now X. It's not such a happy place.
Yeah.
The routes that I used to use
Mm,
are not as easy as they used to be.
mm,
So it's a bit beyond me, and I don't find it very interesting, is the truth.
wow.
So
Wow.
I'm quite happy to delegate that part of it to somebody else.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love your advice, really. And I'm hopeful that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. Now, Alice,
Good.
in case we have some, interested viewers who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of any of your books, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
Yes, they're all available on Amazon and in local bookshops where I live in Wales. And
Mm,
you can also access my work through my website, which is www.intheplottingshed.com. So all of my work is up there. All the links are up there on intheplottingshed.com. And also on Amazon. If you put my name into Amazon, the book should come up there.
it's great.
Um,
That's
so
amazing. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Martin books directly on Amazon and also on other platform. So thank you so much, Alex, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. This is such an amazing conversation. I love it wholeheartedly.
well, thank you for having me, Peter. It's been a joy to speak to you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.